Everybody's got a financial plan till they get punched in the wallet.
Hello and welcome to The Daily Budget, a podcast by Billionaera. You know us from our few cringy YouTube videos and also our Instagram where we post daily vocabulary, financial literacy, and we are here today now with our first podcast episode.
Yes.
And in a way, it's a little meta because the reason that we're doing a podcast and the inspiration for it is also the inspiration and the message behind this first episode. In that, when we started Billionaera, I should say when Marco started Billionaera and then wrote me into it, the idea that we had for this was something very different than how it looks today.
Yeah.
You know, we were talking about master classes, courses, I don't know, some YouTube videos on the side.
Totally cringy. Totally not what we're moving forward to. And it's like, thinking about it right now, it was too much more like school-based as opposed to based on what you guys want.
Yeah. But even just the medium was very different because we had, you know, we were thinking of YouTube videos and in the same kind of style as you see with so many YouTubers, 7 reasons why you should buy 3 iced coffees a day, that kind of thing. And while we knew that we wanted to transition to a podcast eventually, we quickly came to realize when we were doing the videos that our best interactions actually came in between takes and when the camera wasn't rolling. The kind of off-the-cuff, ad hoc conversations, remarks, and insights. And we realized that, you know, what we needed to do was get started on the podcast early.
Yeah, so we want to bring the raw, uncut facts from our mouths.
Yes, completely unedited awkwardness and
realness, genuine authenticity.
Absolutely. And this kind of circles back to, you know, our beginning quote, you know, inspired by none other than Michael Tyson himself. And going, you know, just like this podcast, it, you know, was not the original embodiment of our vision for Billionaera, so too do pretty much everyone find themselves in situations vastly different than what they envisioned 5, 10, even 1 year or 6 months prior. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about that from a financial perspective. And I think we can just kick things off by maybe talking a little bit about our stories and, you know, how we've ended up where we are today versus where we thought we'd end up or where we planned to end up, you know, several years back. So do you want to start?
Well, had you asked me where I would be right now, I'd say in a bank working with clients, specifically rich clients. But that changed, you know. I wanted like finding a way to bring about my knowledge and my skills in finance and in a way that actually helps people. You know, that was like the first thing. That's like always like the most cringy way of saying it, or like the most like politically correct way of saying it. What I really wanted to do is have freedom, guys. Like that's as simple as you can put it.
But so, like, as a kid, what was your dream job? Did you have one?
Yeah, investment banker. That or a pilot for the Royal Canadian Air Force, guys. I know, Fed.
Well, one of those two was cool. The other one, like, what kind of 6-year-old dreams of being an investment banker?
The one that's been like freaking manipulated by fancy cars and movies, clearly. And yourself?
Well, kind of in the same vein, I thought I was going to be a corporate banker, so maybe not investment banking necessarily, but it also depends on your definition of investment banking because it's a fairly ambiguous term that can mean many things.
Right.
But for me, I really wanted to pursue, really it was just the blind pursuit of money. And I chose to study business at university much to that end. And I had it all laid out. I had it all visualized in my mind. I would graduate, I'd get a job, in corporate banking, likely with one of the big five here in Canada, and then just move onwards and upwards and live the Bay Street life.
Yeah.
and yeah, I assumed, I was like, oh, I'm gonna be earning six figures. Everything was great, and it was weird because six figures, I've always had it in my mind that you need to make six figures in order to live any kind of a happy or satisfied life. Like 100,000 was my magic number.
That was the minimum, right?
Exactly. Anything below that, and you're living the life of a peasant, and stupid me.
Yeah. Very stupid.
What a shock I was in for once I graduated. And an entry level salary.
First job offer,
$30,000. I still remember my first official full-time job after graduating. It was all at Alberta. So
God.
And what was it? My salary, $34,311 a year for what was called a personal banking associate, which is essentially the person you go whose office you go into when you step in a bank and you want to talk about something. That's a level above what the tellers will deal for you.
So your financial advisor, anything but the teller, really. And how did that propel you outside of that realm? How did you want to get out of there?
Well, first and foremost, I think it was the sales aspect that kind of drove me away, because I am not a natural salesperson. I've never liked it. At the very least, in that kind of corporate, target environment and cold calling, man. Cold calling. If that's a whole other podcast, me just ranting about cold calling.
Actually, I have a question, because it kind of relates to me too, because a lot of the people that I know within the financial realm, they say usually the same thing: the pressure from the sales, the inability to actually learn what they want, how to target some of their life goals. Yeah, they don't really teach you much of that in the realm. But just to jump out of that, how did you know that you wanted to focus on something different within the realm of finance?
When you say different, are you talking about post-bank but still staying in finance, or getting out of finance altogether?
When I made something different, I mean, how did you control the narrative as to what your life within finance would be? Whether it was teaching it, learning it, or whatnot. How did you take control of that?
Well, the truth is I didn't really. When I started working for the bank full-time and I realized that, long story short, I hated it. And it was kind of a crisis moment for me, actually. Here I was just out of university. I spent 4 years and tens of thousands of dollars studying and preparing myself for this life of banking. And yes, I know that working in a retail environment versus a corporate environment are two very different things.
Yeah.
But when I got a taste of just the type of work, the atmosphere, the vibe, it was not for me, and I quickly realized I cannot do this. And so it basically sent me into this kind of little crisis spiral where I left. I got a job at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and here I am saying, I'm not a sales guy, and then I go into Enterprise where it's all just upselling. So the irony isn't lost on me, but I spent a year and a half there. I actually did very well there. I worked my way up from the entry level to a branch manager by the time I left. And at that point, I had a friend in the government who reached out and offered, hey, Alex, I know you've been working 80, 90-hour weeks at Enterprise. My department is looking for some people if you think you'd be interested in. So, I jumped at the chance to do that.
Yeah.
And I spent the next year working overnights in the government.
Jeez.
Yeah, taking a slight pay cut from what I was making as a branch manager. But at least I had, your typical 37.5-hour working week. I had vacation. But what I didn't have was a sleep schedule. But I did that for a year, and then during that time I was applying for various competitions.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting the position where I am now, which has been absolutely phenomenal. And it's nothing like I thought it would be. Like it's nowhere near where I thought I'd end up. Like public service is never a place where I envision myself, especially with someone with a business and finance education.
Yeah.
I always envision myself working, for corporate banking, the multinational corporations, living the jet-setting corporate life, and having the finances to boot. And then, I spent a couple of years earning, your relative, like your entry-level salaries. And I learned really that my magic number was not at all realistic. Like you can live comfortably on much less than $100,000 a year.
Yeah.
Of course, I mean, depending on your situation, right? That's kind of a blanket statement. But in general, as long as you're careful with your money and you know how to budget and how to use it, a lot of people don't need as much as they think.
That's right. The one thing you want to avoid in life is to be rich broke, where you, instead of a $300 credit card bill, you have a $50,000 credit card bill, and you're still over your top of your income, right?
Or you see the people like Dave Ramsey has some great YouTube videos. Some of his callers, they're very entertaining to listen to.
Yeah.
And what surprised me was the amount of people who would phone in and they say, "Oh, I make $200,000 a year, but I'm still broke," and
That's because even though they had a plan, they took a punch to their wallet.
Yeah. And so this is where we'll get into a little more, the finance aspect of things. But just as with, each of our careers, Mark, you didn't really talk too much about your careers. So why don't you fill the lovely listeners in?
Career. I'm not too cool with having a career. I've never really lasted too long in anything that settled in what a career would be. I like independence, I like ownership, and I like making it happen. And I think that's a hashtag I'm going to start using now.
Yeah.
Is hashtag making it happen. Because the things that we want in life, the goals and the aspirations that we have, they're continuous goal, right? Even if you've reached $1 million, do you stop after? No. Even if you have the house that you want, do you stop? No, you still have to take care of the home, right?
Yeah.
So
I was going to say, I think we should qualify when you're talking about a career, you're talking about a 9-to-5, like your regular corporate job, because obviously you want a career.
Well, my career or my life right now, I'm a business owner and I do bookkeeping, and it pays well, relatively well. I do also part offhand jobs for friends and family because I'm a man of many talent. But anything within the financial realm or technology are things that I'm very interested in. I think it's what's going to be leading the world, or is currently leading the world, is your money and your tech. Or should I say your iPhone now?
Yeah. So your money and the unforeseen circumstances, the bends in the road, the wrench in the works that life throws at you. Yeah. It happens to everyone, whether it's a major car repair that comes up out of nowhere, like the time my first car, which was a 17-year-old BMW, the radiator sprung a leak and essentially exploded on my way home from work one day. And I was driving along one moment, and then the next moment, just steam gushing out.
Oh God!
Engine overheating. Yeah, it cost a fair bit to fix, and a lot of people will find themselves in a much less fortunate situation, in that they may not have the financial means to pay for these things.
And that's why, we came with the Daily Budget podcast as a way to remind people, on an everyday basis, you could make changes to improve your financial life. It doesn't necessarily have to mean I'm not buying food today, so tomorrow I could be rich. No, it comes with little purchases, or as some of our last videos says, how to save more money by spending more. It's by finding a strategic plan to your financial life.
Yeah, and we are, as we record these podcasts and as we, spread our message, we are learning as well.
Yeah.
We are both firm believers in the idea that we never stop learning. We are lifelong students. In this case, we are lifelong students of money. How it works, how to make more of it, how not to waste it, but how to make the best decisions in your individual circumstance. And that is exactly what this podcast, like you said, is intended to cover. We want to talk about pretty much anything and everything, and we'd love to grow it to the point where we start taking your calls as well. And talk and be able to give some guidance, some advice, because it's one thing to record ourselves sitting here and post that for all to see / watch / hear is what I meant to say. And it's another to really be able to communicate with you one-on-one. So in these early stages, we are we're doing our best to grow our tiny little brand here into something that can really become a force for positive change.
To go back to the previous conversation we were just having, a quote kind of struck to me, like, everything you learn everything you needed to know, you learned as a child. And it kind of it is facts. Think about your social skills, your like the way you interpret information.
English is hard, guys.
We'll try to cut that one out. We'll try.
I'm the editor. It's staying in.
Yeah, and it's right. And one thing reason why I use the quote now, making it happen. And if you think about it, even when you're a kid, the information that you're taking in is constantly being updated and being interpreted in a way that you actually understand more from it. Mm-hmm. Not just that, now you can also ask questions. And that's what we're doing here with Billionaera. We're making it happen because we want you to ask questions, but we're also going to be asking questions that relate to you. Deep questions, and as well as some simple, fun questions. Mm-hmm. The reason why is because we're making it happen.
Yeah, we want to present a challenge function to your financial lives. There are many people out there who give great financial advice, and each one of them has their own perspective and brings their own experience to the table.
Yeah.
You have Dave Ramsey, for instance, who, I've seen some people describe him as an austerity pimp. Beans and rice and beans, and a very hardline, very almost extremist view. But he comes from having the experience of becoming bankrupt after becoming a millionaire, and so for him, finance and debt in particular, he treats it as like a recovering addict, where it's something to be avoided at all costs. And then you have someone like Graham Stephan, another very popular YouTuber who talks about finance. He made his money in real estate, and by living extremely frugally. The things he does, a lot of people are not willing to do, or rather very uncomfortable with. Things like, what was it he does? The 20-cent iced coffees or something. And just, living very frugally. Like, being smart with your money means making a lot of uncomfortable choices.
Yeah.
And it means sacrificing some things in the short term to, be able to enjoy so much more in the long term. And we, as people, as humans, we have this unique, wonderful ability to visualize and conceptualize the future. And yet, so many of us, especially when it comes to money, are so stuck in the present moment that we don't take the time to adequately plan for our financial futures. And financial literacy is just one of those things that is so under-taught and undervalued, and so many people, especially the younger generations, millennials, Generation Z, the people who we are primarily trying to reach,
You know-
they don't know anything.
Yeah, you know what's hard about it is the fact that, like, especially, like, I could talk from first-hand experience. It's very hard to determine what has real value versus what is just pure pleasure, because a lot of the time it does have the same reaction within your head. Your mind doesn't know the difference. Because as long as you find pleasure, as long as you find some type of good within it, your mind's gonna try to focus it as a good thing. So now growing up is, how do you make the decisions that are less pleasurable but more rightful for your financial or your goal-oriented future?
Yeah, delayed gratification.
Gratification.
That is the word of the day, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, patience is a virtue, is what they say.
Exactly. Well, I think back to when I leased a brand new Mustang. Summer 2016, I leased a 2017 Mustang for 3 years. That was no delayed gratification. That was me see, me want, me do, me buy.
Me get, me lease.
And here I sit 4 years later, thinking of what I could have done with the $18,000 or thereabouts I end up spending on that car over the 3 years. And if I had invested that 18 grand, how much more I would have today. And we're talking about 4 years here. When you think about how much time you have between now, whether you're 15, 18, 23, and by the time you're going to retire, we'll pretend that retirement is still something that's possible for our generations.
I mean, so is buying a house, right? But we'll get there eventually.
We'll talk about that in another episode. We're going to cover everything.
We even got a whiteboard so you guys can see what the real calculations are.
Exactly. Real-time math.
And whatnot.
Yeah, although, I've never met a financial equation that uses the quadratic formula, so I'm not sure what high school was preparing us for.
That's right. I'm still trying to figure out Fibonacci.
Yeah, there's a cool little snail thing.
Little snail thing, you hear that? He's supposed to be a finance major.
No, I kid. That's the golden ratio, actually. The Fibonacci sequence, that's just the one where you add the number preceding it to get the number after.
Yes.
What it's actually supposed to model, I do not know.
There's
exponential growth.
There's not just exponential growth. There's so many ways to use it. I remember I looked it up on YouTube, and this is totally off topic, guys. There's 12, 15 different methods of using it, and it relates from geography all the way to finance and math and whatnot. But all those to say, please stick with us. We are your piece of daily budget, and let's try to avoid those punches in the wallet, guys. Mob and weave. But honestly, no, we can't grow a channel without you guys, and we really need it. And by commenting, liking, sharing, and even discussing with us and getting back to us, we know what to talk about, we know who to address it to, and we also know what to bring forward.
Yeah, no, exactly. As much as we make content that we think will provide value, and we also want to hear what it is that you want. Whether you're watching us on YouTube, listening to us, as a pure podcast, we want this to become much more than two guys sitting talking into a microphone and a camera. We want to build a community. We have very large ambitions for this, but we can't do it without your help. So I think this will pretty much bring us to the end of our first episode, but we will aim to release an episode weekly, maybe release more than weekly depending on what's going on. If we have if we find some we have a salient experience or something that we just need to get out there. Yep. And depending if we get a lot of requests and questions, we could absolutely do things like maybe a live stream, like a live Q&A.
Yeah.
But all that, that will be to come. I think that's it from us for now. So thank you so much for tuning in.
Yes.
And we'll catch you in the next episode. Goodbye.